A very warm welcome to President Marcello Pera, to all of you, because tonight is a very special occasion to listen to a very prominent figure of Italian and American culture, and I feel indeed most privileged to be in a way as ambassador to host this event. Sister Margherita is an extraordinary personality. In a way, she's really the perfect example of what unites Italy and America. Her whole life has been dedicated to two causes, which she herself has defined in her marvelous book, The Fighting Nun, My Story. She has defined these two main points of her life: faith and study. As you are fully aware, Sister Margherita is the leading world expert on Philip Mazzei, the great thinker of our Enlightenment and an important inspirer of the American Revolution. Her merits and contribution to the American-Italian culture have been recognized on both sides of the Atlantic. To mention but a few examples, she is a professor emerita of Italian language and literature at the Fairleigh Dickinson University, and was inducted into the New Jersey Literary Hall of Fame in 1993. Much before that, in 1977, the President of Italy had conferred on her the honor of Knight or the Order of Star of the Italian Solidarity. Sister Margherita was a student at Columbia University, and soon she became a favorite disciple of Giuseppe Prezzolini. Giuseppe Prezzolini, a very unique figure in the Italian and Western cultural 20th century scene. He was a very renowned intellectual, a philosopher, and a writer who was first a professor at Columbia University and then director of Casa Italiana. Professor Prezzolini recognized in Sister Margherita all the talents and all the intelligence of a great scholar. She recalls that on the occasion of a visit to her mentor in Lugano, a few months before Prezzolini turned 100 years old, Prezzolini published an article in the Gazzetta Ticinese, in which he spoke of her in this way, and I quote, "Sister Margherita is one of my little plants, many of which did not take root, but she did, and produced good fruit. I taught her Machiavelli and Guicciardini. She surpassed me with Philip Mazzei, a Tuscan who wrote well, and he had spirit and above all courage. It seemed to me when I saw her that she was the sign of an alliance between the United States and Italy. In fact, with Europe, because Mazzei was one of those Italians who knew how to speak several languages, and he visited each country. He always brought something new." So, Prezzolini. As she will explain in her conversation with Councillor Gian Nicola Sinisi, that Tuscan was not only a good writer. In a sense, Mazzei was the quintessential Italian, a versatile intellectual, an able entrepreneur, a surgeon, a horticulturist, an insightful diplomat for Poland, since he was to become the Polish chargé d'affaires in Paris in 1790s, and he had a keen sense of business, which led him to play an important role in the purchase of arms for Virginia during the American Revolution. As Mazzei's example shows, there are several very significant points of contact between the Enlightenment and the Italian Risorgimento. There are points of contact on one end with the Risorgimento, and on the other with the political thought of the founding fathers. Let us think, for example, of the rich correspondence between Filangieri and Franklin. Their letters wed the foremost dream of a universal constitution with the solid strength of a nascent federal state. We thought it particularly fitting to rediscover these connections this year, in 2011, the year of the 150th anniversary of the unification of Italy. This is also a way to strengthen the shared ideals and values of freedom which underlie the friendship between our people. The development of these and other elective affinities between Italian philosophers and the founding fathers is truly a work in progress, so to speak. And tonight we continue in Columbus' wake and in the rediscovery of these shared values. In 1987, Sister Margherita was presented with a Christopher Columbus Woman of the Year Award and referred to as Columbus's true daughter. Never were words truer. Let me now yield the floor to our very special guest and to Councillor Gian Nicola Sinisi, whom I would like to thank sincerely for the extraordinary work he is doing and especially for having taken the initiative of bringing here with us Sister Margherita. Thank you.
On this occasion of the 150th anniversary of the unification of Italy, I'm happy to be here to speak about Philip Mazzei, the Italian-American patriot of the American Revolution, who was a friend of the first 5 presidents of the United States: George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. As far as I know, no other individuals received letters from the first 5 presidents of the United States. In fact, I have prepared a small book with just one letter from each of these first 5 presidents of the United States. How did this project that I sponsored for many years develop? Well, it goes back to 1974. Some of you may not have been alive at that time, but I was. Peter Sammartino was a chancellor and president of Fairleigh Dickinson University, where I was teaching. And he called me one evening and said, he used to call me Maggie. He said, "Maggie, what are you doing for the bicentennial?" I said that I really wasn't doing anything special, that I wasn't an historian. But he suggested that I translate from the French the first of the 4 volumes on the history of the American colonies published in Paris in 1778 by Philip Mazzei. But I had never heard the name Philip Mazzei. So I said, "Peter, who is Philip Mazzei?" Well, notwithstanding my ignorance, I did become interested in this writer, diplomat, and philosopher of the American Revolution. When I submitted a proposal to the New Jersey Bicentennial Commission, I obtained a grant from both the commission in New Jersey and from Washington, D.C. And so I translated Volume 1 of the history of the American colonies. And it became part of the book entitled Philip Mazzei, Jefferson's Zealous Whig. And it helped me to seek other donations to continue the research. The New York Times published an article on December 7th, 1975. I really sound like an old lady, but the truth of the matter is that I'm going to be 90 years old in February. My book, Philip Mazzei, Jefferson's Zealous Whig, really helped me to advance all this research. The New York Times published an article stating that Thomas Jefferson in 1780 declared Mazzei, and I quote, "a zealous defender of our affairs." And the newspapers in Italy in 1800 defined him as, and I quote, one of the zealous actors of the American Revolution. It would suffice to quote from the introduction of the 3 volumes of his writings that I published in 1984 in order to understand Philip Mazzei. At the Center on Mazzei Studies, where I reside in Morristown, I have approximately 3,000 documents. And one of my assistants, who certainly did a great deal of work on the project, was S. Eugene Scalia, the father of Justice Scalia. And he was the one who prepared the microfilm of all Mazzei's papers. In 1980, on the occasion of the 250th anniversary of Philip Mazzei's birth, I obtained a Mazzei stamp with the help of President Jimmy Carter. At that time, I was in Washington, and I was standing next to the Italian Prime Minister, Francesco Cossiga. And I just turned to him and said, "Your Excellency, what a disgrace. The Americans have a stamp on Philip Mazzei, and you have done nothing in Italy?" Well, poor Cossiga didn't know what to say. But he said, "Well, I'll take care of the matter as soon as I get back to Italy." And he did immediately. As a souvenir on this occasion, in fact, I have brought with me, I hope we have enough of them, the first issue of this stamp, and you will receive a copy of it, I hope. Mazzei was a citizen of the world, actually. From Poggiarcaiano, he traveled to Turkey and to many other countries. He actually spent 18 years in England, where he became acquainted with Benjamin Franklin, with Thomas Adams, and other citizens of Virginia. And in 1773, they invited him to America to introduce the Mediterranean products that he was sponsoring. And although he came as an agriculturist, Mazzei became profoundly engaged in the political battle against England. In 1776, he participated actively in the political life in Virginia and wrote articles for the Virginia Gazette. Among the 3,000 documents that I collected, there are letters from Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Mason. Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, and of course he consulted with Mazzei. Madison wrote the Constitution of the United States, and I'm sure that he consulted Mazzei. And George Mason wrote the Bill of Rights. One of the documents that I have is very interesting. It's entitled, "The Instructions of the Freeholders of Albemarle County to the Delegates at the Convention." Now these instructions that he wrote demonstrate Mazzei's desire to contribute to the Virginia Constitution. In fact, he was one of the founders of the Constitutional Society of 1784 and wrote, "The glory of having been the founders of this Constitutional Society of 1784 is so gratifying and compensates largely for the disadvantages. Once independence was declared, Mazzei was proposed to Congress as a commercial agent of the United States. And in his letter of October 19, 1778, Jefferson affirmed, in writing to John Hancock, who was president of the Continental Congress. And this is what Jefferson wrote about Philip Mazzei. I believe he is suitable to negotiate this matter to our advantage. He possesses the ability, and he is acquainted with the European leaders. He is a native of Tuscany, and I have proof of the Grand Duke's personal esteem for him. He was a zealous liberal from the beginning, and I maintain that we can have faith in him with regard to his integrity. Mazzei was well known in 18th century Europe and in the United States for his ideals about democracy. The documents that exist prove that he collaborated with Virginia's leaders in the struggle for independence. He served as that state's agent in Europe after the Revolution and founded the Constitutional Society of 1784. Mind you, this is 3 years before the actual Constitution was written. It was entitled the Constitutional Society of 1784. This group of activists discussed the formation of the constitutional government. Among its 34 members were two future presidents, James Madison and James Monroe. Other patriots included John Blair, John Page, Patrick Henry, John Marshall, Richard Henry Lee, and of course Philip Mazzei himself. These 3,000 documents were collected from 29 repositories in the United States and from 22 repositories from foreign countries, from France, Italy, Poland, England, and Holland. Among these documents, one finds Mazzei's farewell when he left Sandy Hook. Every time I pass Sandy Hook, I think of these words. He wrote, "For my part, I am going out of this dear adopted country, and I have no children, but the honest part of the inhabitants of the globe are my brothers. Posterity, my children, and were I to go and spend the remainder of my days in China, I will always, with pleasure, contribute to the forming of an asylum for mankind from oppression." When Thomas Jefferson learned of his death, he wrote to Giovanni Carignani on July 18th of the same year to express his sorrow, saying, among other things, "An intimacy of 40 years has proven to me his great worth, and the friendship which had begun in personal acquaintance was maintained after separation without abatement by a constant interchange of letters. His esteem, too, in this country was very general. His early and zealous cooperation in the establishment of our independence, having acquired for him here a great degree of favor." Seems to me that there are no other words to add to describe the role of Philip Mazzei during the American Revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Margherita, for your explanation about who was Philip Mazzei.